Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of my RollerCoaster Tycoon Deluxe build series. In this one we'll be going through Millennium Mines. Coming into this map, I wasn't sure exactly if I was going to stick with just the mining theme or try to expand a little bit on the alien type stuff that I had been doing in the last couple of maps. In the end, I decided to go all in on the mining theme, mostly because there's the pyramid map that's coming up here, in which I'll probably be going all in on the Egyptian theme. I went all in on the Roman theme in Evergreen Gardens. So we'll see if I can kind of go all in on a particular theme of the available themes for each and every one. And this one seemed like the most appropriate to go for the Minetown theme. So I sort of went all in on that and tried to create the best Minetown I could. So we begun the time-lapse here. The approach that I took to building out this map is a little bit different than what I've done so far, which is not, unheard of. Coming into this map, it presented a bit of a challenge in terms of the size and lack of really anything. It's an ugly map. It's kind of like Dynamite Dooms in that way, that it's really difficult to make this map look appealing. Even with the Minetown theme, I was looking around on YouTube, and a lot of playthroughs are just sort of placing rides, and you got your paths, and then there's dirt everywhere, and it's really hard to make this particular piece of land look good. And in addition to that, it's pretty just barren. They don't give you any predefined like path layout really. They give you a little path to the train, but that's about it. But in terms of, aside from that, they don't really give you anything that sort of gives you guidance in terms of how you should lay this out or what would be, appropriate to have where. All they have is the train. And then the train itself is somewhat obtrusive in that it, goes through the map, and it's fairly complex and long, and it only has the one station. There isn't really a good spot to put a second station aside from one stretch of track underground, which I do later on. But for the most part, it's kind of just in the way. But I do pledge to keep all of the original existing rides in each map, so I just worked with it. And I do add a chairlift as a second transport ride later on too. But, once you sort of deal with those facts, the way that I decided to deal with those is I figured I would sort of build out the entire map before I focused too much on like props and scenery, but I was going to put a heavy focus on architecture and fences in particular for types of scenery. I really wanted to sort of get a layout going, build up areas, kind of build a narrative for different areas so that it would provide some sort of guidance on where I should go with how things should look in a particular area. I wanted things to look natural and, to sort of emulate what a large mine area would look like. So I built like some factories, and in the center, I built like sort of like a little office complex where the executives would be. And I tried to make use of rides that would make sense in a Minetown setting, which another issue with this map is that you don't get a whole lot of rides in terms of not roller coasters. You don't get very many of the gentle rides and thrill rides. A number were missing, like the observation tower, oddly, you don't get in this one, which was kind of a surprise. I hadn't remembered that was the case. So makes filling this large area somewhat challenging because you really have to make use of theming to sort of fill in the gaps. And the architecture of the area is like already fairly complex. You can see the train tracks there going through all of the different levels of the sort of mined out section of the map there. It's not removing the train just sort of leaves a whole bunch of holes, I find, anyway, when I play this map. So I try not to remove it, as it is a pretty cool train. So instead, what I wanted to do with this map is sort of augment the existing look as much as possible. And I actually think I did a pretty good job. The end result is so far my favorite of all of my builds for this series is going to be this one here. This is hands down my favorite build when it comes to the end result. Coming into it, I was really just sort of like, oh, Millennium Mines, okay, here we go. But once I sort of got a feel for where I was going with it and was able to just sort of take off with my ideas, and everything just sort of came together, and I'm really happy with the end result. It's it's my favorite park so far, hands down. There's just no other way to put it. It used to be Evergreen Gardens, and then I did Trinity Islands, and Trinity Islands became my favorite, and this one is now my favorite over Trinity Islands. I wasn't really sure at this point in the build that I'm displaying in the video what I would be doing with the park yet, so I just sort of wanted to fill out the front section sort of from east to west and give myself the ability to extend paths sort of across the whole park in any direction, so that I could sort of build out different pieces of land as I got ideas for them. I left land mostly alone until I had a good idea what I wanted that piece of land to look like. So I wanted access to the entire, east to west flanks of the park, so that I could sort of extend wherever I got some inspiration for where I wanted to go next. And as I said, I planned to build out the entire park before I really looked at scenery, and this would allow me to sort of adapt architecture. There's a lot of sort of iteration in this build where I would build a prototype of something, or a half-finished building, or a roller coaster that had a little bit too much momentum at the end, and then I would add more and refine the look as I really wanted to go for. That sort of, if you've ever been to Disneyland or Disney World, and they have that, what's that roller coaster, the Mine Train coaster, the Thunder, whatever, that was kind of the look that I wanted to go for the entire park. And of course I do build a Mine Train coaster in this one. This map just wouldn't feel right without one, and I wanted to have it pretty low to the ground. In fact, I wanted to keep pretty much everything in this map low to the ground, and that way really sort of keep the feel of, even though I wanted it to be pretty dense, I did not want it to feel like high rises, or that it was built vertically too much. Like, it should have been pretty low to the ground, as it is a mining area. It's not like a city or something like that. So I tried to keep it fairly low. The wooden roller coaster is the highest object that I end up building in this one, and I just felt that the wooden roller coaster should be completely above ground. I was debating putting it somewhere else and making it lower to the ground, but I figured that I would allow the mine train coaster to sort of fill that gap, and I wanted the wooden roller coasters supports to be, quite visible. I wanted this area to feel very built up and sort of wild, I guess you could say. Have a lot going on in there. Now, an interesting caveat to this map is that the $20 umbrella trick, which is really the only sort of gameplay hack that I utilize, as it is within the bounds of the rules of the game, so I might as well make use of it. But this map, it rains so often that you don't really gain that many new guests in between rainfall. And so the number of guests that are there that can afford to buy a umbrella, collectively sort of diminishes over time until you get to the point where everybody has an umbrella, and you're not bringing in enough guests to really justify getting more umbrellas purchased. And so for the initial portion of the game, I was actually pretty strapped for cash. And then oddly enough, it sort of like swapped around once I hit around, 800 guests or something like that. And suddenly I had more cash than I knew what to do with. And I was just able to sort of build freely and do what I want. And I was just collecting money like at a ridiculous amount. And that was well after I had swapped to an entrance fee style park versus a pay per ride park. And I thought that maybe I would talk about that a little bit here, as I see a lot of YouTubers and things recommending charging for both if you can, and I'm gonna go against the grain here and recommend that you do not charge for both, and I'll explain why. So in RCT1, guests have a limited amount of cash, and they arrive with that amount of cash, and that's the maximum amount of cash that they can spend. So whether they spend it at the entrance or they spend it at rides, it doesn't really matter. Now, it really depends on what your objective is on how you should fee your park. So if you want to keep guests in your park as long as possible, an entrance fee is better because that takes a little bit of money away from them. They still have some to buy food and things like that, and then they'll stay in your park as long as they are happy. And they can ride as many rides as possible, and they'll stay for a long time. Whereas if you charge for rides, eventually they're going to run out of money and they're going to have to leave the park because there's nothing for them to do. Now, if you charge for both, you just make that happen a lot quicker, and you diminish the amount that you can charge for rides. So you're charging them at the entrance, you're charging them for rides, they ride a few rides, they run out of money because you took some of their money at the entrance, and then they leave the park. And that can be good if you want quick guest turnover, although for quick guest turnover I would recommend just pay per ride and no entrance fee, as they will quickly run out of money in that situation anyway, which is why at around 800 to 1,000 guests I swap over to an entrance fee based park, because you have so many rides at that point that for the guests to actually go around and enjoy all of the rides, the only way for them to do that is to not pay for rides. They'll run out of money before they ride all of the rides. Now in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, they introduced an ATM, so now guests have unlimited money, which is why I think Chris Sawyer opted to make the choice between entrance fee or rides mandatory, where you can't charge for both anymore. And that's because being able to charge for both and giving the guests unlimited money just makes the game way too easy. Because the guests never run out of money, and so there's no strategy to how you price your rides. So just a quick tidbit there, that, if you really want to strategically play this game, and while it may not appear so, it's actually better to pick one or the other. Pick an entrance fee based park or pick rides. Usually I start with a pay per ride park because it's small and there's only a few rides, and so the guests are probably going to not run out of money for a while. And then once the park reaches a larger size, you swap to an entrance fee based park, and this allows the guests to stay in the park longer and not run out of money. Something I found fairly challenging in this playthrough is to make everything look just a little different in this map. I didn't want the areas that I was building to sort of be indistinguishable from other areas. I wanted everything to sort of have its own, style and character, and to be instantly recognizable apart from other areas in the map. Luckily, the theming of the mine town allows for industrial style buildings to fit in really well, and industrial style buildings are just great for theming because you can make all sorts of like wacky looking stuff, and it makes sense because it's industrial or something. That was sort of the saving grace in being able to create something a little different in each area, was I could really play with the building style and terrain style to sort of give each thing its own feel. Now I'm building the office park. I thought the go-karts would be great for the office park type area to kind of make it look like, it was surrounded by a road or maybe a parking lot or something. I also used the standard asphalt or cement. I guess the black one's asphalt and the gray one's cement. But I thought it would be pretty neat if the go-karts and the paths and the office buildings all just sort of intertwined, and if this area was pretty much center, so that you could, branching off from this area, you could get to any other area of the park. The only thing that I kind of wish that I had put here, although I guess the train station being so nearby kind of counts, but having maybe like a monorail or something, transport ride as well. But I think the train station's fine. It was also the only area that I wanted to give a nice grass feel to it. I didn't want the whole thing to be brown. So I do try to use vegetation and things sparingly throughout the map later on. I wanted to make this area grass right now so that the look and feel would sort of give me inspiration for the surrounding areas. But I thought that this area contrasted pretty nicely against the being surrounded by mining stuff and browns on all sides and things like that. I threw some flowers and things in there later. And I wanted to have all the paths kind of coming in and connecting to this area, with a nice bridge going over the train. Later on, I make the train area a little more developed. I don't actually do anything like put more station or anything. I just leave the bridge, but I do change the textures surrounding it to make it look like it's sort of sitting in a cemented embankment or something approximating that, I guess. I did find that there was a lot of land to fill in this area, which did lead to me sort of breaking this playthrough up into many different playthroughs. I ended up having 22 source videos of varying lengths, and each source video is effectively me starting and stopping the game one time. And yeah, it was like along the lines of like I would kind of come in and build out an area, and then I would stop and just look at it. And I spent a lot of time just appreciating this park and going around and running the park and configuring things. There is a terrible accident that happens later on, and what's really interesting about this particular one is that I caught the whole setup on video. Like I just happened to be building in the area when things sort of took a turn for the worst. And so we'll take a look at all those moments and sort of look at the play by play as how this disaster uh, set itself in motion and then ended up happening near the end of the video. For this area, I wanted it to be like pretty complex. I wanted to have multiple levels. I wanted to have like sort of bridges and cliffs and edges. I felt I had built enough to begin work on the mine train coaster, which I wanted to go sort of into the valley area to the west of the park. I started with building a sort of, I don't know, factory type thing, somewhere where maybe it was a smelter. Later I add some big smokestacks and stuff like that, and I end up calling this a gold mine, so it would make sense. But I wanted it to sort of start and come in and complete underground, with a station sort of sitting beside the building there. And I was really happy with how this coaster ended up looking, especially with the uh, river rapids that I also build in the area. I tried to like sort of use the depressed parts of the map to hold coasters or log ride, river rapids, those types of things. I wanted it to not have much in the way of paths, and that would just sort of be where the rides would happen. So that was something slightly different that I tried to keep with in this playthrough. I also didn't use any roller coasters with inversions. I figured that I would stick with not inverted coasters to go along with the sort of theme of the mine train and wooden roller coaster and things like that. Though I know in Open RCT2 and RCT2 the wooden roller coaster does get a loop, but not in this playthrough. And so as a result, I don't make use of anything like the steel coaster. I do a large steel mini coaster, however. Something I really appreciate about the terrain in this one is that you can sort of just make it look like anything. I mean, like not anything in that it in the end it's still gonna have to look like something if you want it to look somewhat decent, but you can sort of make excuses for all sorts of holes or cliffs, sides, or whatever. And the fact that it uses the wood instead of dirt as the default is really helpful. It saves a lot of money in sort of giving the look and feel that you'd probably desire. And it also allowed me to utilize the dirt wall in specific locations to really like enhance the feel of it. That's one location right there where I wanted sort of a descending path through the dirt, a dirt hill down into the I guess smelter, we'll call it the smelter, entrance and into the ride. And so it typically I wouldn't use dirt as it's kind of defaulty along with the default grass, but this is kind of one of those maps where the inverted is true, and so using the default grass strategically along with the dirt can really give a nice effect. Next, I figured I would put some more food courts. Given how much that it rains in this map, I didn't want guests to have to travel too far to utilize an information kiosk or a souvenir stall. So I do make heavy use of those, and I put food courts pretty much everywhere, probably a little closer to each other than I normally would. But again, it ended up working well because that is where a lot of the early cash for my playthrough came from, up until the point where I was pulling in guests and guest turnover was good enough that things just sort of resolved on their own. I really wanted to have the river rapids go in and under into that sort of lake area there. I just needed to prepare the terrain and surrounding rides. I wanted the roller coaster to first of all be able to travel safely over it and have enough clearance and things, and once I had that in place, I was going to expand with the river rapids. I decided first I would actually decorate the office park area as even though I wasn't focused on decoration, I did decide that if I had a clear vision for an area and I knew exactly what I wanted it to look like in terms of decoration and stuff, and I was like completely sold, I would just go ahead and make it happen before moving on. That way I didn't accidentally break the idea with future building or a ride or in a bad position or something like that. I wanted to ensure that the scenery was utilizing the space before I continued. Again, another food court, this one on the eastern side. So now I had 4 food courts, all sort of in their respective zones. Figured I would put some trees in and around where that coaster comes out to begin the lift of the into the chain lift. Again, same reason that I sort of decorated the office park was I knew exactly that that would be what I want. Now I figured that I should put the further train station so I could get some more guests, traveling around the park. And then after this, I put the chairlift to sort of get the north to south and east to west crossover happening in terms of transport rides. Like I said, I put the whole station underground because that's the only place that you really get a long stretch of track that you can match the station size of the initial station, and I did want to keep the 3 trains that I had going as it's a pretty long train. So I figured that I would just turn this into one huge building and sort of link it in with the launch coaster there, which I guess along with that and the space shot or woe belly or whatever they call it in this game, those are the tallest rides aside from the wooden roller coaster. But in terms of structures and stuff, the wooden roller coaster is still the strongest. And what I decided, or not the strongest, the tallest. And what I decided to do with the launch coaster there was to make the long pole that it goes up there part of an industrial structure, so it would sort of be like the end result of whatever is getting processed in the buildings that it travels through, or something along those lines. That's the end effect I was going for. Finally, I decided to do the river rapids, which this one is really fun. I am so happy with how this one turned out. I wanted it to have I didn't want it to feel like it was going out into the wilderness. I really wanted to keep with like sort of the mine town ride of it. And so aside from sort of the dips into the water and then back the other way, I wanted to keep it close to buildings or architecture. And I definitely wanted some interaction with the mine train coaster. And I'm particularly happy with how the mine train coaster goes over the train and goes over the river rapids there, and then into the ground and under, and then back out and over the river rapids and then back in. That was like perfection in terms of the look I was hoping to achieve in terms of building it. And I'm really happy with that. Finally decide to put the chairlift, and I wanted it to connect from two different buildings. I wanted it to go over the big chasm and also the office park type area, and to sort of give a scenic view. I kind of wish that the large chasm was a little bit more to the north, or spanned a little bit more to the north, so that the chairlift could have been a bit more centered. But this was, being so close to the entrance of the park, I think kind of hampered the distribution of the transport rides, because there really wasn't a whole lot in terms of transport rides near the back of the park, aside from the one underground train station. And I do think that the guest distribution suffered from that in the end. Now, I probably could have pumped ads at the end of the game just before I did the ending video to try to get more guests in the park to distribute and spread out more, but in the end I didn't do that. So there are it is pretty sparse at the back of the park, I noticed when I was watching the footage again. Something that's a little different in what I did with this particular map is I made use of empty terrain textures. So for instance, in the food court there and next to the twist, I just sort of made the terrain rocky and flattened it out, and then just put nothing. And I do this again near the back of the park. And it's not something I would typically do. Usually I try to put some sort of something in all areas. I mean, having empty terrain is fine. I've done that a lot throughout this playthrough. Pretty much every map has empty terrain to sort of augment different spots or things, because if you overcrowd it, it just looks artificial if you have a tree in every single square and things like that. So there is a balance. But usually I would put more than what I end up putting in this particular map, especially in certain areas that are developed. Usually I would have buildings or some other sort of scenery in and around food courts or something. But in this case, I don't. And I thought that was kind of interesting, reviewing the footage and stuff, in that just the number of styles of just the way that you can make things look. Going back and looking at all of the parks that I've done and the various videos and things like that, like there's always things when I'm watching it where I wish that I had done it differently or done a bit more or thought a bit more about it, because I come up with ideas after I've already recorded the footage. And then, it's a question of, do I want to go back in, do the idea and record all of the additional footage that I have to use for the outros and things like that, or do I just sort of leave it as is and think about it for next time? Like maybe when I'm doing the RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic, I can address sort of some of the deficiencies that I see in my parks when I'm building them. One such deficiency in this one, where I really wish that I had sort of done it before I had addressed or recorded the outro footage, and had just sort of spent a bit more time doing like a once over of the park, is I wish I had used the alternate colors a bit more on the towers, like the Woe Belly Tower or Space Shot Tower, and also later on the launch coaster tower as well. I wish I had kind of done like an alternating like yellow and colors and stuff, because usually in industrial areas, large towers like that will have like sort of alternating bright colors and things like that. And so just looking back on that, I think that would have really added a lot of character. But again, I didn't, I felt that I had spent enough time on this map and recording this footage and things like that. And when it came down to it, it probably just wasn't worth spending the time on doing it. Though when I replay this in the RollerCoaster Tycoon Classic, I am really looking forward to replaying some of these maps with the additional building tools that are given to you in RollerCoaster Tycoon 2, like the walls and roofs and things like that. Like building with the land and things is interesting, and it does have certain advantages over the piece by piece style buildings as well. For instance, it doesn't take as long to build a building. You just raise one land piece and you get a roof and you get 4 walls automatically. You don't have to worry too much about placing those things individually. Whereas with the piece by piece system, it does add a little bit of time, I think, to scenery placement and things like that. And finding a good combination of the two, is preferable, because it also gives you the ability to have like nice contrast in your buildings and more variation, not just having a whole bunch of flat walls that are the same color. So there are trade-offs, and so I am looking forward to replaying a lot of these, and in particular this map here, where I have access to the piece by piece buildings of RollerCoaster Tycoon 2. I think that'll be pretty cool, and I will be able to do a lot with those here, just as I felt that I did a pretty good job on doing the land-based buildings in this one. There wasn't really any sort of building that I wish that I had included that I didn't include. The drop coaster that I built later, though, it's probably the thing in the park that I'm the least satisfied with. It's also the thing in the park that causes the accident and a few deaths. You know how these theme parks are pretty dangerous. And yeah, like it, I like it, it's okay. But I didn't make it the main feature, kind of like I did in Dinky Park. And I just wish that I kind of spent a bit more time on building the drop coaster out a bit more. Although at the same time, if I had built it too much out, it probably would have crowded the area and just made things a little too busy in certain parts of the park, which is something I did want to avoid. Even this junior steel mini coaster here, Um, you know, in the end, it does look pretty good, and I like this coaster a lot. But it did make the area a little busier than I had kind of hoped. Although I try to mitigate this with some additional buildings and to kind of give it like a narrative that, the Steel Mini Coaster has the log coaster, so I have the Steel Mini using the log, and it comes out of the one building, goes around, and then goes into a further building, which also connects later on when I build it to the log flume station, and then that like kind of sends the logs off in another direction. So I kind of tried to build like a I don't know, logging system here, something like that, some sort of approximation, just to give the area a little bit of a narrative and to kind of justify why some buildings are there, or like why these things are all built here, as it wouldn't make sense otherwise. I mean, aside from the fact it's a theme park or whatever, but if it's truly a theme park that was built, after the mine was deserted, then it would make sense that all of these things were somewhat, kind of functional before. So I tried to really play into that fact. The occlusion in this area also began to kind of become a problem. There's a little bit more occlusion in this area than I probably would have wanted, especially with the combination of the wooden roller coaster and then the multiple buildings that are beside it, and there's a one path that goes in between two buildings, and it's pretty much occluded from all sides, so getting in and around there after the fact was a little difficult. I usually try to structure my builds in such a way that I don't have to deal with those issues, so building from the ground up, making sure that I finalize different areas before I build up and cover those areas, so that I don't have to try to finagle with exactly which position on the screen maps to which level on which tile, when there is not very good indicators, especially when you have everything like hidden to try to see behind things. So it sometimes you end up thinking you're on the right tile, and then you build something and you realize that no, you actually just built on another tile which was perfectly lined up with the other tile that you're trying to reach to, and there is no way to reach that other tile regardless of what you do. So there is that. So I do try to build in a fashion throughout all my various builds that avoids that problem, but sometimes I make mistakes in terms of the order of what I address when, and I end up creating situations like that occlude something that I hadn't yet really finished. Especially in the approach that I took in this map, because I do build out, a lot of the architecture and fencing and stuff before I go back and I do the theming. And so as a result of that, because it's usually the architecture that causes the areas to be occluded, there were some areas where I hadn't thought about the theming yet. I go ahead and I build the architecture, and then I discover that the architecture is actually occluding more of the area than I had wanted. So I do get it all themed, and there's nothing that I had to sacrifice as a result. It does work out in the end, but I did have to spend a fair amount of time just going back and playing with different areas. There's a lot of iteration, as I mentioned earlier, and not just of the rides, but of the theming. So it's like, I'll go and I'll start an area, I'll jump back and I'll theme another area because I get some sort of inspiration or something like that, then jump back and continue, and then build out a new area, jump back, theme another area. It's not quite as organized as, let's say, Aqua Park was, where I just sort of like went around the map in a counterclockwise, fashion and just sort of completed each area and then moved on. Aside from the initial infrastructure that I built at the very beginning with the transport rides. In this one, I just go all over the place, and it's wherever I get inspiration. I get inspiration here, I'm going to build something here. You know, I'm back here at the wooden roller coaster where I had built it, you know, basically at the start of the game before I even passed the scenario. And now I'm over here at the river rapids after I decided that I did not like how it was just sort of turning around in barren land. I wanted to make this area a lot more interesting than it already was. And this was probably one of the hardest areas to get some sort of vision for. I wasn't really sure what I could do with it other than, you know, putting some vegetation and stuff. But in the end, I did come up with a pretty nice, I think, natural looking style building that covers that and gives the waterfalls some context. As I do find that putting those river rapid waterfalls like without some sort of context surrounding them with the terrain, they just look a little off because they have the walls and stuff like that. And so I wanted to like kind of give some idea of where that water might be coming from with the building. Decided I would put another sort of industrial burner style building there. I wanted to bring the path system out, but I realized that I had sort of like cut myself off. And I wasn't sure what to do about that. And I was debating just not putting a path at all, or maybe trying to get a path up and over the mine train coaster. But in the end, what I decided to do was to construct that sort of additional building, and then I wanted to put the sort of more industrial or space style path going and stretching in between the different burners on its way down to the other area. Finally, I decided to complete the station for the train and to also build out the sort of industrial burners that I had wanted over the launch coaster. I structured them in a way that gave me an extra tile in between, and what I wanted to do with that tile was to bring the path out and connect it in and around to the other path that I was planning on bringing out from the other burner. And this would go around the sort of river rapids area, and there would be another food court there. And then, you know, again, I get inspiration for another area, so I jump over here and I start building the logging building that I would connect the mini roller coaster to. You know, I figured I might as well throw this in there. And now we're back over here with the burners, and I'm connecting that path in and around. At first I was worried that I was making this area a little too busy, but in the end I think the path actually complements it. It gives it a little bit more structure and reason for being there. And it also allowed me to build a few more rides out here, as this area had become like pretty barren, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to like bring a roller coaster out and kind of dive it through the hills there, or if I would bring a path out that way and develop the area a little bit more. And finally I decided, yeah, I want the path, as it'll go in and around and loop around and provide more access. Then I built the food court, and once I had built the food court, I had a pretty good idea how this area would end up looking. You know, it was pretty obvious that the location for the building should be right here. It would make the river rapids a little bit more mysterious in terms of what it was doing, and also that little bridge over top, you know, behind the building, I think just looks a lot better having the building behind it instead of it just being out on its own. This was also a good opportunity to use more of the dirt tile and also the sort of iron wall tile, and then some mixed with some rocks and dirt, and then some nice chain link fences and stuff. I really like how the river rapids sort of turnaround building here, because the building doesn't actually serve any purpose aside from just providing a tunnel for the river rapids. There's no station or anything in there, but I put that one green tile that's there. I put there because I knew that I wanted that area to be a lot greener than it is. I just didn't want to do that theming yet, but I wanted to remind myself when I went back there that that's what I wanted to do. And so that's what I did. I just put one tile that was kind of the terrain style that I wanted, and then that way when I go back and I look at that area, it's like, oh yeah, right, this is what I was going to do here. Because obviously, I can only do one thing at a time, and I have like ideas for multiple areas in the park at multiple times. I thought it'd be cool if the swinging ship was kind of here in like a little pond with a rocky, sort of surrounding, just resting on there. I didn't want to put it down. I didn't want to build any large like water areas either, as usually, mined out area is going to be fairly dry unless you have some sort of a tailings pond or something. I didn't really want to put a tailings pond because there isn't the scenery that would decorate such a thing, and I think it would just be boring and space consuming, and so I thought that was a good spot for it there, as I did want to use all of the thrill rides and the gentle rides, as there aren't very many of them, and I didn't want to have too many roller coasters and make the area too busy. Finally I decided I would go with the Minnie Mouse roller coaster. The mine one though is what I ended up picking, and this would augment the building in and around the launch coaster. It would kind of give the building I wanted to build there a little bit more context. I think it actually looked pretty cool. It ends up looking like some sort of a grain elevator, or I don't know, some sort of factory or something when I end up finishing with the whole exterior and the theming. This is also another area where I really utilize that sort of empty terrain with rock idea. Instead of putting a whole bunch of barrels or something around this particular area, I decided that I would just have the rock with fences, and that's it. I really do wish that they gave some sort of rock prop in the scenery and just the general scenery. They do fix that in RollerCoaster Tycoon 3. You get a lot of nice just sort of general rocks, but in this one you don't get that, and it's really unfortunate because there's a lot of places in my maps where just having a few rocks to place would really make the area look more authentic, and the rock terrain doesn't always do it justice. Like, you end up with like sort of this square thing. You only get the one terrain pattern, and there isn't a whole lot else. So if you use the rock as your terrain ground or whatever to act as rocks, then it also makes it difficult to use that same terrain for like a industrial style roof or whatever. It limits your capacity in using it other places, because otherwise it just sort of looks like everything's the same texture, and you can't differentiate between what's supposed to be what. So that does make it difficult, and it would be nice if there was some rock props that you could place on the dirt and things like that to just give it a bit more feel. But you have to make it work, and I think what the mixture of the dirt and the dirt sidings and then the rock top and a little bit of iron siding here and there provides a fairly good approximation of what I would want in this map in particular. In other maps, where I use a lot of grass, yeah, I definitely would have liked to have some sort of rock prop, because putting the rock terrain and stuff, often I use it underneath paths to give them some border and definition, but it makes it difficult to just use them in random places, and then given that they're square, they can look out of place just if they're sitting in the middle of a hill or something like that. Whereas if it was a prop that had a bit more transparency and rounded edges so that you can see like grass behind it or something like that, it would blend in a lot better. I really wanted to make this area interesting for the guests that would be walking by it, and also obviously to make it interesting for myself and you guys watching on the YouTube channel to look at as well. And for inspiration in this area, there was a few areas in past parks that I thought ended up looking really neat and I wanted to expand on. One was the area right beside the Wild Mouse coaster in Katie's World. That one had a little pond with the wood walls, and then I had put the chain link gates there, and I thought that gave it a really interesting look, especially with the bridge right beside it, and I definitely wanted to do more of that. Same thing with the river rapids that I had done in Evergreen Gardens. I thought that was a pretty good one. I really liked the way that one looked and how I had the paths going in and around. And I wanted to have a larger version of such a river rapids, but not so much in like a wooded area, though obviously, as it just wouldn't fit really with the map theme. But I did want to have that sort of back area that's closest to the border of the map have a bit more greenery, as it would make sense there in that some greenery is still able to grow, though later on, of course, I do put a lot of shrubs and things just randomly throughout the areas to break up the color, and so it's not so brown, as I do make use of brown colors a lot in my buildings as well. So now I'm building the log flume station area, and I wanted this to be a very long log flume. Something I wish I had done is make the station probably about 2 tiles longer. It ends up being a 6 tile station, and I really wish I had made it 8, as there just wasn't a whole lot of boats, and so I ended up having to spread the boats out with a fairly high minimum departure time, just to get a nice even spread across the ride. And it does mean that you don't see boats very often. I did try to catch some good moments of the boats, but the timing just wasn't great on this ride. And an extra 2 stations, which I think would have given me another 3 logs or so, just would have been really nice, but there just wasn't the space for it, as I had to get the type of station and approach and things that I wanted, and for it to fit in with the theme that I was going for, I had to put 2 S-bends to connect the station, as I needed the station to be at the back of the building, but I didn't want it to look like the station was at the back of the building. I actually wanted it to look like the station was in the center of the building. And so for that, I used an S-bend coming into the station and an S-bend departing the station, and then that way it's centered on both ends, in and out. And there's enough space for the queue to fit inside too, and for it to all look proper. And if I had put another 2 tiles on the station, then it would have been really, really, really long, and there just wouldn't have been enough space on the other side of the long sort of, log thing. Yeah, the thing that it's like ascending up to and coming out of, I don't know, I don't have names for all these things. Like I said, I just built wacky looking buildings and they just sort of work. But I wanted to have some space on the other side there for some coaster activity and things like that. So any longer in it, just I think it would have looked out of place. It also is a fairly large building, and coming up with, you know, a design that looked natural and wasn't too big was also an issue here. I think another 2 tiles on this building would have just make it look a little out of place, and it would have been a struggle to come up with a design that was appropriate for what you would expect in the area. I did have to I did put like a lot around the building though. I thought the area that the logs come out of, the log flume comes out of when it's reapproaching the station, and then coming out on the sort of conveyor belt up to the top and then going down there, I thought was pretty neat. I figured I wanted to have the largest structures at the back of the park so that the park was mostly flat at the entrance and into the center where the office park would be, and then sort of surrounding the park along the edges and the back there would be larger buildings that would sort of have elevated paths between them, and a lot of, you know, I didn't want to have paths on the ground in the same way that I did at the entrance or the northern half of the park. This is the station for the drop coaster. Again, I'm pretty happy with this coaster. I do just wish that I had maybe made it a little bit larger than I did end up making it, but overall a good coaster, aside from the accident, which wasn't really a flaw of the design so much as it is a flaw of the way that RollerCoaster Tycoon handles broken down rides, in that when a ride resumes running after breaking down, it releases a car immediately and does not respect the original minimum, you know, departure time that had happened up until that point. And as a result, you can get 2 cars that are extremely close together, which is what ended up happening in the accident. And it's, as I was mentioning earlier, that it's pretty interesting that I was able to capture all of the different sort of warning points and then the crash itself all on video. So we'll be looking at that when that comes up shortly here. I think it's in about 10 minutes or so. I'm not sure, but when we get there, I'll stop and point out what's about to happen. I saved the area here near the drop coaster station theming wise until the very end. I actually put another ride in this area, very last thing, which is a car ride, which I knew that I wanted to put there. I just to sort of avoid the inevitable issues with occlusion given the scenery and the fact that there was going to be another building stuffed back there. I sort of just held off on that until the very end, after I had sort of gone through and done most of the scenery, and then that way I could just throw it in and hopefully avoid a lot of the issues with occlusion. So finally, given that I had pretty much filled the entire map in terms of ride placement and buildings and that type of thing, I finally figured that I would start with the scenery, and I approach the scenery the same way that I sort of approach the buildings, in that I don't really go through it in a orderly fashion. I just sort of start theming different areas as I get inspiration or look at things and go, oh, that could use this or that could use that. It was a lot to chew. It was a little bit overwhelming. That's probably the best word for this map, is overwhelming. Even coming into the map with all of the existing architecture and the train going into the ground and the whole thing being brown and there not really being any starter paths or anything like that. It's a little bit overwhelming to sort of look at this map and envision something that is more interesting than a pile of dirt, which is what you get. It is definitely these types of maps that make me wish that the terrain texture set was a bit more expanded, though. There's only so many combinations of black and brown and the wood roof and the gray roof and the rocks and things that you can do before everything sort of starts looking the same. So I did try to, spice things up a little bit with putting some barrels on the smokestacks and things coming out of the buildings to kind of make it look like there's 4 different egress points or whatever. I haven't done that yet. I do add that though. And just doing various things to try to make it different, but even though it's the same, like using wood as a base and then iron as the building, and then in another case using dirt and iron as the base and using black as the building, mixing iron and black together, using wood for an entire building surrounded by dirt. And so in each case I tried to vary the combination of what was used where, to make the buildings look maybe a little bit more different than they actually are. And then of course in the office park I used the colored paint or colored cement siding, using rocks for dithering along with the dirt, and then of course the sort of rocky, or not rocky, but dirty grass terrain texture. I do make use of that quite a bit now that I'm doing the decorating, starting with this area here. As you can see, I also did it kind of near the water. I tried to keep it near water sources, as it would make more sense that green is happening near water, and I also put it near the edges of the map, given that there's so much green on the outside of the map. I do wish that he had actually used some of the he as in Chris Sawyer, but I do wish that he had used some of the dirty grass texture when he was building the outskirts of the map outside of the park bounds, so that it's not such a glaring contrast between dirt and then like sort of this nice grass that goes off into the distance for really no reason whatsoever. I mean, it does give it the illusion that it's this mined out area in the middle of nowhere. It just would have been nice if it was sort of had a blending layer between the dirt and the grass at the very least, so that it wasn't such a dirt on one side and then beautiful grass on the other side. Of course I did this too in the office park area, but the way that I sort of justify this narratively is that it is an office park, and so it's going to be kept looking nice, and I do have the whole thing sort of surrounded by a fence, and this just is to give the impression that the area is maintained by people, that if people weren't there maintaining that grass every day so that it looks nice for the office park people, then it wouldn't look nice at all in the first place, and it would look a lot more like the grass that's around the park in other areas. I really am just so pleased with how that River Rapids hill turned out looking, with the mine train going over it and the grass texture and then the chain link fences and the river rapid itself going down into the lake with the river and stuff, and then the train going over it. Yeah, I really like that area. I'm not sure if it's my favorite area of the park yet, but I don't know. I think it is. I think that's the highlight, the thing that I find the most interesting. Although again, I try to make every area of the park interesting so that any screenshot you can look at any part of the park from any angle, and there's something interesting going on. There's something pretty to look at, and I always do try to make it so that there's a lot going on in the park. I find that that gives it a more realistic sort of view. Like I want there to be a few different things happening on screen in any given scene, and so but not too crowded, not so crowded that it looks like unnatural and like you're just playing a sort of a puzzle game where you're just fitting in things where they can fit in. Which, I mean, I guess what I did on Forest Frontiers would kind of be like that, and because it was pretty grid-like, but that's just what that map is good for, and so playing into that works well, especially given that I wanted to double the paths on that one for the map size, given that so many guests end up coming into that map. But the map is pretty small overall. As I was saying, placing the trees was a little bit interesting in this one, in that, I don't want it to be brown everywhere, but at the same time, it doesn't make sense that there would be a whole bunch of trees or whatever growing, because the whole area was mined out, and so a lot of the nutrients would be had been taken out of the soil. They probably would have clear cut the whole area, and so not very much would have started growing back yet. But you would, obviously there would be some greenery and shrubbery and stuff around, especially given that now there would be groundskeepers in the theme park and so on and so on. So choosing the amount of scenery and the type of scenery in each area was a real conflict for me. It was always kind of a case of placing a little bit down, taking a look at it. Is it enough? Is it too much? Is it too little? Adding a couple bit here, spinning around, taking a look, making sure that it looks normal from every angle. And then given all like the different levels and sort of nooks and crannies that are in this particular area, especially where I have the log flume here, there's a lot of different levels and things that are occluded by other levels and stuff, and so trying to make sure that all of these different areas had some sort of something to them, but not necessarily so much that they overpowered other ones or were duplicates of other ones, or like I wanted it to be an interesting area. And also the occlusion, I didn't want to build like a whole bunch of architecture down there either, because then that would occlude the roller coasters and things like that, and I wanted those to be pretty much out in the open so that you could see them pretty well, and that was the main feature. And same thing with the log flume, though I do end up throwing in one sort of feature building into the center just to make the log flume a little bit more interesting in terms of the tunnels it was going through in the center there. And I put like this little garden that I made there, as you can see, and that I really like. I think that looks like super cool. I really like that, and you know, and then with the terrain, with the green and things like that, it adds something to this side so it's not completely brown, given that the majority of it was going to be brown and the rock and stuff. So I needed something that would justify green, and that was kind of what I came up with. Something else that I did to kind of try to differentiate the rides from the rest of the terrain, given that I didn't want a whole bunch of like wacky colors in this one, was I used the goldish sort of yellow color as a replacement for a lot of like lighter, what would have been like lighter brown or colors along those lines. Typically, if I was building in, let's say, a more colorful map where I wanted to really like accent the wood nature of these things, I would build, these things I would use a light brown or like a standard brown maybe, instead of this gold color. But given that there's so much brown, I decided that I would use the gold color in place of that. And I think that worked out well. I use it like across the park. I pretty much try to make every ride have one element at least that has that color in it. And I think when you combine that with like the blues of the water, the greens of the shrubs, I made sure to always use the dark green, except in a few cases. And yeah, I think when you contrast all of these, it really looks good, Coming up here, we have the setup for the unfortunate accident. I cannot believe that I did not catch this when I was playing, because I was like looking right at everything that was happening, and if I had just seen what was about to happen before I saw it, it wouldn't have exploded on me. But I did not see it. But going back through the video, yeah, I have a frame at least in every key moment of the setup that would have allowed this to happen, and all I had to do was like sort of stop the ride and restart the ride, and it would have resolved itself. It was just a very, very badly timed breakdown, and then two cars that are starting that are way too close to each other. I present the following with no commentary. So yeah, that's how that went. Not good, especially considering that, I was so close to the end of my playthrough here. It is inevitable when you're doing like sort of a 15-year or 20-year playthrough that you're probably going to have some poorly timed breakdowns like that can result in a crash. But it has happened in a lot of the maps that I've played, although it's pretty rare that I capture every single important moment throughout the build process. So I figured, hey, why not document it there for you. So I hope you enjoyed that little excursion down Explosion Lane. So yeah, anyway, aside from that, just finishing up the park. I figured I would do the decorating, a little bit more of that, and then prepare for constructing the car ride building. I was well into putting all the vegetation and the fences and the finishing touches at this point. I was feeling pretty bitter about that explosion. I really couldn't believe that, honestly, especially since I saw it. Like, I saw the whole thing unfold, and I could have prevented it, but I did not prevent it, and it was really unfortunate. So now building the final truck building here. This car ride's not too bad. I don't mind it. It wasn't really as elaborate as I was kind of thinking I was going to go for at the start when I started building the building. But when I saw sort of the logistics around with the terrain and how the connectivity into it and stuff would work, I scaled back my ambitions on this one a little bit, and it became a little bit more of like a side piece as opposed to a main feature. But, you know, it still, I think, ended up looking not too bad. I thought I would put a little bit more, given that I wanted the path to extend out in front of the drop coaster station building. I figured I would put something to sort of like connect and bridge the gap, as I needed to drop the path down a couple tiles to connect around where I wanted for the truck ride. And also I didn't want it to be at like the same level as the queue into the drop coaster. I thought it would be better if it had a little bit of a difference of level there to make the theming a little bit more interesting that way. I really like car rides for maps like this though, and I kind of am surprised that I didn't go for the car ride sooner, like maybe as an additional ride in the office park area. That seems like something that I would have done, and had I gone through this map again, I probably would have put one in there. Again, afterthoughts, given I'm viewing what I did and all my ideas in a consecutive manner, and then I see things, I'm like, oh, I could have made that better. I could have made that better. But it's still pretty good overall. I'm pretty happy with this. Again, it's my favorite build out of all the maps that I've played so far. This ended up being by far my favorite build, and I'm really happy I went with this approach overall, I think, in the end here, with just going all out on the mining town. This was the right choice. I'm glad I didn't try to jam the alien theme in there, thus giving me the freedom to really go all out on the mining town stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this build. We're coming up on the end of the video here. Again, I don't know when I will be able to put out something new. I haven't even started my playthrough on the next map yet, so no telling when the next one will be, but sit tight and I will be working on more RollerCoaster Tycoon. I do plan to finish out the whole playthrough with all the maps in 1, 2, 3, and Classic and beyond. And like I said in the last video, I am working on some infrastructure stuff. My subscribers has been climbing a lot faster than I've really been expecting, so it's highly unlikely I will have the infrastructure in place by the time I reach like the subscriber level that I wanted it in place for. So that it's good and bad in a way, but that's okay. I'll just work extra hard to try to have that stuff ready. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this build. And here is the end result.